Welcome to Some Things Considered, the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. I'm an author. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I run the nonprofit 1455 Lit Arts. For more about me and what I do, check out seanmurphy.net. Hey, welcome back to Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we seek out cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm Sean Murphy, your host. I run the nonprofit 1455. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University. I have written some books. You can find out more about me at seanmurphy.net. What I like to say up front every time is the thing I enjoy most about the work I do is that it gives me the opportunity to almost always be in contact with creative, interesting, wonderful people. So it behooves me to call on them to have these types of conversations, and they're all important. But I will say, if you have been checking out stuff I've done for really the last decade, it would be almost impossible that you don't already know who my next guest is. But I have an extra amount of excitement for those of you that are about to meet him for the first time. But either way, it is my tremendous joy to welcome back to our virtual space my dear friend, Justen Ahren. We're going to hear all about him and the things he does, and you'll hopefully pick up on why he and I are so tight and kindred spirits. But let me do him the respect of a formal introduction. And this is the short version. He's a very complex dude, but Justen is a photographer, a poet, a musician, and writing workshop facilitator. His photographs are held in several private collections and have been exhibited in both solo and group shows at the Minor Family Gallery on Martha's Vineyard, where he lives. He is Emeritus Poet Laureate of Martha's Vineyard and founder and visionary of the Noepe Center for Literary Arts. We'll talk more about that. He's received 2 commissions for poetry from the Wendy Taucher Dance Theater Opera and one from John Sims' Afro Dixie project. His 2 poetry collections are A Strange Catechism and A Machine for Remembering. Folks, that's just scratching the surface, and we're going to get down into the marrow. Justen, I just saw you a couple of weeks ago up on the Rock, but it's always great to see you, and I welcome any opportunity to lock horns and talk craft and hear about what you're up to.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you for all the amazing work you do. Kudos to you for everything. And we didn't get to go clamming when you were here, but we did get a couple kayak trips in. So next time, the clamming.
We did indeed, and we will talk about your deep and profound connections to nature and how, even though I like to consider myself amenable to that, you've always exposed me and encouraged me to go deeper, even in familiar places, which is such a gift that you give. I said up front, I think those folks tuning in now will be like, I've seen this guy. I love this guy. But for those that don't know you, very appropriate. Let's get up to speed. What I call the Justen Ahren experience, because you contain multitudes, as Whitman would say. Talk about your evolution as a poet and artist, and as I mentioned, your visionary founding of the Noepe Center, which had its own myriad rewards during its decade, but continues, as this conversation proves, to have these amazing ripple effects in terms of the community that you help nourish and curate there.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's a big question, my evolution. I mean, I guess I've always, since I was a kid, have been just conscious of making out of whatever I was experiencing. And if I would say that's a through line through my entire life is, I think my work is always being generated from what am I experiencing? What am I perceiving in the world? And what am I feeling through my body, my mind, my heart? How does that manifest in the world in form? And that takes on various forms. I began as a songwriter, a musician, and I picked up poetry, even though lyrics were you know, the lyrics run into, but at some point I set the music. I didn't set it down, but I committed myself to writing more poetry and really leaning into, okay, what could I do on the page with language without music, you know, accompaniment. And then the photography came quite unexpectedly. That was not something that it's an interesting story. It's a longer story. I won't go too much into it, but it's fun to relate that I had seen a shaman, and the shaman was actually had been reading some of my poetry. And talk about a crazy way to start off a shamanic session. He says, "You're not a poet." And I, you know, I was like immediately kind of taken aback by that. As a little my ego, I kind of bristled. Like, what do you mean I'm not a poet? He
Right.
said, "You're a visual artist, and you're going to start taking photographs and or movies or something." He didn't quite say what it was. He just said it'll be visual. And you know, maybe he planted the seed. I don't know, but within, you know, a few weeks or months, I guess, of that, I found myself with a camera and started making images. And I found that a very interesting way, again, going back to this kind of through line of like just making form, making art out of what is in me, what I am experiencing and perceiving in the world. That became a very unique and new avenue for that expression of what is. How do I almost feel like I'm in when I photograph, I feel like I'm photographing what is my interior landscape. I do a lot of landscapes and abstracts and images with landscapes. And so in a way, it's a way of imaging what's happening inside to the outside. Yeah.
Very well put. You know, I when you describe someone as a creative person, I think that conjures up for anyone a lot of images, some of them stereotypical and maybe not positive, some extremely positive. But if I were to describe you, which I do, as a creative person, I not only mean that to accurately describe your whole sensibility, but I also mean it as a tremendous compliment because I think your photography in particular underscores the fact that while you are very grounded in your space, and we'll get into that, where you live and the kind of world you've built, you also have a fascination with travel, exploring. You find the art wherever you go. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and celebrate that with you. But also, I think that that's something that can be inspiring for any creator. This notion of whatever your circumstances, whatever your environment, there's art there, there's life there, there's potential community there. And I think you, as well as anyone I know, have excavated this combination of passion and a keen witness and witnessing to life, bearing witness, but finding the beauty wherever you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes it's beauty, but it's not easy beauty. So, I mean, I have a series of images on refugees when I was working with refugees, which also I created a machine for remembering. My poetry collection came out of volunteering with refugees, and so that's not always a traditional beauty, but
Right.
there's something beauty in the human experience that, yeah, in that. So, I don't know. There's a quote. I've been reading this book by Robert Henry, which is the book is about 100 years old. It's called The Art Spirit. And you kind of just, since you threw me this softball here, there's a quote from that book. He's talking about artists, and he says that an artist finds the gain in the work itself, not outside of it. And the work, what you were just expressing, we can find that work anywhere. We can find the art anywhere. It's really, and he also goes on to say the artist, just to quote Robert Henry again, the artist is alive in any person. He becomes inventive, searching, daring, self-expressing. He disturbs, upsets, enlightens, and open ways to better understanding. And I think that is a wonderful definition of the artist. And that curiosity, that inventiveness, that searching. I think this is something that I talk about a lot about this when I'm working with devotion to writing and working with other writers and artists, is being curious about our lives and being open to what is becoming here. What is this that is happening
Mhm.
with me, through me? And like you were saying, you know, how do I make something of this? because we're always making something of whatever our experiences are. And it's just, I think we have a choice what we're going to make out of that. Some people make drama in their lives, some people make trouble, and some people make art. And that doesn't mean that you can't make art that makes trouble or make art that is provocative,
Right.
that makes people question. But I think it's just it's, it's hard to maybe say, but the current, I don't feel like things are coming at me. I feel like the current is coming from within me to the outside, and I'm in the world. I'm engaging with that, and curious about what is this, what is this? And I think artists too, working without definition, um, the world is open as opposed to, as soon as we define something, uh, we call it something, and we kind of limit it, and give it a lot of baggage. And so to be open, to be curious, to ask questions, that leads to further investigation. And I think also a word that I love about creative people is abundance, creating an abundance in our lives, because wow, this is all possible. This is all material. Not to make it a completely transactionary
Right.
living, because that's not what I'm saying. But we are in transaction with the world at all times if we, choose to be engaging
Right.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, while you were saying that, it occurred to me, and again, I think you epitomized this. I feel that when we're curious, especially in the context of creativity, we become magnets for experience, magnets for relationships, magnets for transformative possibilities. And for me, again, one of the reasons I admire you so much, Justin, is again, I would personally never want to pigeonhole anybody, a creative, like there's the introvert that gets the work done, and then there's the extrovert, and there's this and there's that. And but you really, I think, have cultivated a lifestyle where you embody. They're not contradictions; they're multitudes. As I said at the outset, you are extroverted in your way. You're introverted. You need your space, and you get the work done. But for me, and we've talked a bit, and I hope to talk more about your really deep relationship with nature and the natural world. But you really deeply believe in community.
Hmm.
I do too.
Hmm.
But you have always been a role model in the sense of what does that really mean? And to someone that isn't a creative that's hearing this right now and going, he loves community. Okay, I've heard that before. I would love you to break down kind of how you define community and its
Sure.
importance, and then and then in the context of that, weave in your experience with Noepe, and
Mm,
how you were the person that made that happen.
okay. Well, the first thing that comes to me when you say community, and you said the word weaving in a different context, but I think about that, the weaving together of our lives. That is community. And then, whether you want to call that a net that holds us or whatever you want to refer to that weaving as, we're weaving our stories together, we're weaving our lives together. Um, and then, that creates that connection, the caring. And so uh, community, I think I live on Martha's Vineyard, as you mentioned, and I think what immediately appealed to me was the community here. I grew up, had a moved around a lot, so had a lot of different homes growing up, and I think because of that, and also then when we did settle in one place when I got a little older, like teenage years, it was in suburbia that was rapidly being transformed by development.
Yeah,
So, for example, the cornfields I played in became subdivisions in my lifetime, not in my lifetime, in the period of time that I lived there, right? There was a cornfield one summer, and the next summer it was a subdivision.
yeah,
So I think that loss for me, and I tied to the land. So, that again, my fishing hole, the cornfield, et cetera, those places become subdivisions, parking lots, and that loss of environment.
yeah,
But also the moving around was a loss of friends, and a loss of that personal connection. And so it became very important to me by the time I was a young adult, and that I wanted to find a place there would be a community that I could contribute to,
yeah,
be a part of, and also feel. And again, because I think things were changing so rapidly where I grew up, I felt like people never really wanted to be there, for one, or people were moving in they were unfamiliar. And so Martha's Vineyard being an island, for those people that don't know that Martha's Vineyard is an island, an island creates its own limitations. And so you have a very concrete community. And also, because we're cut off from the mainland, you also have a community that really has to rally around one another, especially in the winter. It's not so small as people might think. I mean, they're a year-round population. Our year-round population is about 20,000. But when you do something in the community, it has an impact, and you can see that. And so that, I think, for me, this was the landing space, a combination of a strong community and a connection to the land and a connection to the sea here. But for me, it was the connection to the land. There's a agrarian tradition that goes all the way back to the settlement, and even before. I shouldn't just say to the settlement, because the Native Americans here farmed the land,
Right.
and worked the oceans. So this seemed like a great place for me in that regard. I felt very at home as soon as I got here. I was like, this is a place where I could have an impact. And that was really important to me, to be able to be in a place where I could have an impact. And so,
Yeah.
talk about Noepe. Noepe happens to be the original name of Martha's Vineyard, the Wampanoag name of Martha's Vineyard, Noepe. I took that name because for the Literary Arts Center, because it translates in various ways, but one of the translation is land between currents. And so I felt like that still place between currents, there's that still place. And Noepe, to me, as a community, was this place where writers could come, get away from the hustle and bustle of their lives, be still, be in community, support one another, and be on this beautiful place, Martha's Vineyard, be inspired by this place, which has a great literary tradition as well. And we would have meals together. And I've told you this story, Sean, but for the audience who doesn't know this, the vision I had nothing beyond, I want to be at a big table with lots of writers sharing a meal, and we're talking about writing, and we're talking about art and life, etc. And from that, Noepe was born, and really with the generous support of the community here. It couldn't have existed in a community that didn't care, and it couldn't have existed without the people within this community. Specifically, Claudia Miller was one, Debbie and Dave Brown, of course, my family, that they helped me to launch what became Noepe. That's how I met you.
And so you did build it, and they did come, as it happens,
For sure.
over the course of a decade, hundreds and hundreds of writers, artists, creatives, many of whom you and I can both attest are now dear friends. So this rippling effect of the community you created, it also makes me think of the word you used, and I know how you feel about this word, but the notion and literal connotation of abundance. You did create abundance in the sense of you helped provide this community with the time and space to create and congregate, and that's enough on some levels. Like, wow, that's pretty special. But the abundance then became this lived community of people sharing resources, sharing connections, forming writers groups, becoming allies. And I know I've written quite a bit about this. What was transformative for me when I came to Noepe, and what you helped me discover, was I didn't realize how much I had missed the sensibility of a grad student. I had enjoyed graduate school and being in writing workshops so much for the intellectual stimulation, for the solidarity, to use a parlance of our time, geeking out on something that other people care a lot about. This was an environment where people could get together without shame or reservation and actually do things that the broader population would probably look at and go, I'm not interested in that at all. But nothing would make us happier than sitting around a fire with some wine, talking deeply about the books that moved us, and writing notes, right? Like, I got to get that book, and you got to read this, and let me send this to you. But so this notion of creative abundance, again, I think we would be remiss if we focused only on how incredibly positive that was for people's creative development. Huge win. But it was also very nourishing for people's spiritual. And I know you could speak more, or you could be more eloquent, but in the times I was there, if I heard it once, I heard it dozens and dozens of times, people saying, this place rescued me. So all credit to you and what you created there, but I think it also speaks to a much larger need that creatives who do so much of this work in isolation and are faced with so much rejection, and don't have often genuine support groups, those things become a lifeblood.
Yeah. Well, there are so many couple of things that that you said that I want to kind of address if I can remember them all. But so many of us artists, creatives, writers, when I think had a similar experience growing up where we didn't have that community growing up because we were kind of odd in that way. Like, oh, I mean, I wrote growing up, but I didn't really show anybody. I was just kind of scribbling on my own. And it's like, who does this? Kind of figuring out like, what am I doing? And not knowing. And I think one of the things that galvanizes the community is when you find those other people like, oh yeah, Sean, you were scribbling away, in the 80s while I was scribbling away in the 80s somewhere. Like, and now, so there is that kind of geeking out. And so, also what we do is we often do in isolation. We often do with no guarantee that it's going to succeed, that it's going to be good, that I shouldn't say that it's going to succeed. It always succeeds if we do it, and it's always good when we do it.
Yeah.
But the feedback from elsewhere, the outside, publications and et cetera that come, that doesn't always come. And yet we still have to work, and there's no promise that that's going to come. And yet we still need to show up and work. And that, for a lot of people, that can be, the thing that breaks them and that they don't keep doing, because there just isn't that, there's not a paycheck at the end of the week. There's not somebody patting you on the back saying, good job. Right. So these communities, I think, become very vital then when we are, when we find them and that we support one another, and we find that, we're all going through that. All of us who are working creatively are going through the same sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what that just made me think, if I were to try to nail it in like an elevator pitch, it's that I think creatives, the typical societal external validation, whether it's a paycheck, whether it's feeling normal, and you have to do that, but the external validation that people that aren't creative are able to more easily find or define, for creatives is a little more elusive, a little more ephemeral. So these types of communities become support systems that are not superficial, that are very genuine. And that speaks to the relationships that develop. To me, it was not a coincidence that people that would come to Noepe for 2 weeks would become lifelong friends. That it's not high school, that's not because this is the popular group. It was like, these were the people that found their people. So yeah, lest we sound like we go on too much about this, community, obviously, like yourself, Justen, contains multitudes, but I think it's helpful for people like you and me to try to break it down and go, what do we mean by that? And why is it positive? Why can this be something that anyone should aspire to, both for their own craft, but in terms of what they might be able to create for other people?
Yeah.
Which is a good enough segue. I definitely wanted to. So if I were to try to say, because again, I would have a difficult time, and it's the best compliment I can pay you. If someone say, what's Justen's deal? I'd be like, well, which angle? We want to talk about his poetry, his photography, his music, his prowess in the kitchen. But devotion to writing has become your life's work. And I hesitate to say that only because I don't even want to limit that. Like, your life's work is bigger, but devotion to writing is a project that you have been letting marinate, and you've been expressing it beautifully, both through writing, through the courses you teach, the workshops you conducted, the traveling you do, and what you're still working toward. Talk to us about the whole devotion to writing project.
Yeah. So thank you, Sean, for that segue. So devotion to writing really comes right out of Noepe. I don't see them as anything separate. It's really about nurturing and working with. I feel like that's my service, is to help others, work with other creatives, writers, I think because my own creative journey is not certainly does not look like this, like, start here and like success is like, for me is like this. It's a journey that has doubt and has uh, it involves surrender. It involves many ups and downs, not sure what the hell I'm doing a lot of times. And so I think just that throughout my life, that through line of creativity, of being creative, and also the through line of the doubt that goes along with it, and the struggle that goes along with it, and the uncertainty that goes along with it. Uh, I just love encouraging others. And I know that you do as well. And this gets back to the community part. This ties into the whole Noepe. What I experienced with Noepe, that I went to school, I got my MFA as well. I didn't experience this there, but when I started Noepe and had people coming there, and you'd already said people would say, it changed my life. Thank you so much. I felt like I I was thankful. Like they were giving me such a gift. So this, for the first time really in my life, other than say the love that comes with with children, um, there was this reciprocity that I had never really experienced. And that would be the thing I would say to people about what this is really about, is the supporting one another in the community. Is it's not like I'm doing something to get something back. It's just a genuine, continuous, I'm giving a gift. People feel like they're giving a gift. I mean, I feel like I'm getting a gift. And it's like, no, you're the best. No, you're the best. No, you're great. No, you're great. And it just
Right.
keeps it's not, again, it's not, oh, I'm doing it because I'm getting something, or you're doing it because you're getting something. It's just um it's beyond all that. And so devotion to writing really comes out of that. For me, it's that service of, I genuinely, it gives me joy to find that other people who are struggling to write,
Mhm.
other artists who are struggling to create, if something I offer them from my own experience helps them
Yep.
get through their block, write their book, write their poem, feel better about their creative process, experience the joy that is in the creative process and the experience the joy, the wonder, the curiosity, then that is such a gift to me. I feel like that is just what a joy we share. Talk about community.
Right.
Now we're really weaving things together. I mean, it's like, that's like, a friendship. It becomes a deep, it becomes
Yep.
a deep exchange.
Yeah.
And so that's where, so devotion to writing really is my way. I teach online. I run workshops. I run retreats in Italy, Martha's Vineyard soon. Um, it's just a way of kind of continuing the community in a different way, because Noepe, we didn't get into why it's no longer in existence, but that's a different story. It just, the physical space is no longer there that we ran it out of. Um, but it's just my way of kind of continuing that work of fostering community, and being able to offer what again brings me joy, is to help others to become, whatever their creative self. I don't know how to quite, I always get a little awkward with that, like helping, but um, yeah, just working with other creatives in whatever way I can.
Yeah, and you do that, and I would say again, as well as anyone I've ever seen, I've had lots of mentors and professors and colleagues. You synthesize the genuine appreciation for the craft itself, the work itself, with a reminder, a very gentle but urgent reminder that it's a daily practice, or it should or could aspire to be something that you put the time in. And I think advice like that usually either comes off as from the mountaintop, like to be a writer, you need to live the life of a writer, or this kind of stern and joyless, like button share, get your words in. It's like, but I think you remind people that it can be frustrating, sometimes fruitless work, but it's work. But if you're already on the path, which many of us have already made that diversion somewhere along the line, certainly if we're, past voting age and double that, and we're still scribbling, something has happened to make us either committed or crazy enough to keep trying. But it's just a reminder that it's a lot of work, and it should be a lot of work. This is
Yeah.
this is the most important thing you're going to do. but you also are always reminding, I think you in a classic writing teacher way, you show and don't tell.
Yeah.
This is looking at your backdrop, the books and the pictures and your, the vibe that you've created. That's just a reminder to people that there is a way to be productive and purposeful, but to slow down and enjoy the process itself, gift and nourishing that gift. And I think that's it. The whole devotion to writing project, obviously, I find extremely powerful and meaningful, and other people agree with me. But I think that when we drill into the craft aspect, I think that's your key ingredient, which is to remind people this is a daily practice.
Yes. And if I were to sum up devotion to writing in a phrase, it's and it's a little bit, even the phrase is a little bit hard to define what I mean, but is that it is a coming to love, that our creative process is a coming to love. Our devotion to whatever we're devoted to brings us to a love that is greater than, it's not just this, I'm not talking about, the love you had in fifth grade.
Right.
Something that is, yeah, it's bigger than us. And so that is what, talking about the creativity, the work that goes into it. We are engaged in self-making as artists, and there's always that exploration, no matter what genre we're working in, where we're working with ourselves and through ourselves, and that's a journey and a process, and it should, as you said, it should be hard work. It is hard work.
Yeah.
But I think what to live otherwise, I think we're not awake, we're we're asleep. And that's one way of going through the world, and a lot of people do. And then to be awake is scary, and it is always a process, and you're at the edge of knowing kind of exactly what's going on, right? And another thing you mentioned, and I just want to be clear too about things, is, I think people have an idea that they have to be a professional writer or a professional artist, and if they're not, then they're some way a failure. But I mean, there are plenty of examples. We could talk all day long about writers, artists who had other gigs. I personally am, I've had a landscaping business for years, decades, and yet, my art is there. And my art, I find time for my art despite having, other responsibilities, having family. There's a place that's the devotion too. It's like, okay, am I just gonna go to sleep and forget that I'm a poet, or forget that I'm a photographer, or am I gonna work into my day and be very committed to somehow bringing into my day the art that I know feeds me and is why I am here, right? So I think that's a big distinction too. That self-making. Well, I'm going to be awake in everything I do, and if it means it's weeding for a couple of hours today, I'm going to try to be awake and bring that creativity to the weeding, or to the whatever it is, to the raising of the flowers, or and that becomes an art in and of itself. That's a lot of attention to bring to something, but
being aware and awake, going through life, and that art comes out of that. And I think the art of life is inherent in that. A couple of quick things you made me think about. I want to give a shout out to Michael Dirda, who's been a book critic at the Washington Post for decades. He's written so much great work over the years, but I'll misquote, but this is from decades ago, but it's indelibly imprinted in my mind. And he talked about, he visited Paris one time, and someone that worked at a cafe was described by another person as, he's a poet. And the guy was working at the cafe, and Dirda reflected and said, in America, someone would say, well, yeah, he's a barista, but he likes to write poetry. And it's like, only in America do we get hung up on, like, guy's a poet. That's what he does. That's how he defines himself. There are so many self-imposed and societally imposed limitations and definitions to when you can call yourself a writer or a creative. And at a certain point, I think we have to kick those aside and say, who cares anyway? It's all about how we're feeling about the work we're doing and whether it's meaningful. Which also leads me, I just happened to watch the highly recommended two-part documentary on David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos.
Mm,
Um, and it's a very familiar story. Those of us that write, and I read obsessively about writing and writers. I always say it's both encouraging and depressing to read writers or creatives that are at the height of their powers talk about how they're never satisfied or they're feeling the
mm,
stress or they always have to remember how to do these things because you think, if Philip Roth talked about, I have to start every new novel, I have no idea. But I think there's inspiration in that because it's a reminder we're human, we're fallible, and it is hard work. But David Chase is talking about when The Sopranos was like a cultural, totem in the early 21st century. And, a lot of it went by because he was busy in the work and
mm.
his goals were so high. He comes close to saying he didn't enjoy it at all. So
Oh,
I think that's also a corrective for Americans to remember. If your goal is to be a bestseller or to make money or be critically, applauded, good for you. And I hope everyone gets what they want. But even if you do get to those very rare, lofty goals, that's no guarantee of satisfaction. And so
right.
what you remind me of, Justin, and frankly, I think one of the reasons you and I have always been very kindred spirits is I had made a decision, very purposefully, in between, say, grad school and, my first, day job, this notion of how do I make my life more creative and whatever that entails. Like, yes, that can be, again, that I can appreciate how pretentious that sounds, but in a very genuine, like actionable way, if I can't be creative all the time, whether it's because of, life pressures or work or any number of sleep, but how do I make creativity the apex and then everything's filtered through that instead of having to put things in different departments and try to access that. I see in your life and your choice of using your creativity and working with the earth, because I know it's not just that you use your creativity wonderfully in that beautiful work you do, but you made it a point to channel that work into something because you need to be outdoors. You need to have dirt under your fingernails.
Yeah.
You made that happen. That didn't just kind of fall into your lap. I'd love you to elaborate a little bit on, because again, I think that will be very instructive and inspiring, especially for maybe younger creatives
Yeah.
watching this that are like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be a bestseller. And it's like, first of all, welcome to the club. And frankly, you probably won't be,
Yeah.
but there's a million different paths. All of them can be amenable to a creative existence.
Yeah. There's a great this will harken back to the word abundance, but if the in Asia, in the morning, the monks go out with what they call the begging bowls. They have these, bowls they carry in front of them, and they go out in the morning and from the monastery, the novice monks, and they go through the markets, usually, and they get food for the day, dependent on this food from the people in the neighborhood, in the town, and to fill that bowl. That's their sustenance for the day. That's their meal for the day, whatever they get. And so the bowls are not these giant bowls, right? So they're tiny and they overflow with food. So this idea that if our needs, if the bowl of our needs is huge, we're never going to feel filled. If the bowl is small, it's going to overflow. And so that reminds me of if your goal is to be if nothing is going to satisfy you but to be a #1 bestseller, sell millions of copies, you might do that and you can work hard to do it. And God bless you. I hope you do if that's what you want.
Right.
But if it doesn't happen, are you going to be devastated and are you going to be bitter? And is that going to drag you down? And if it is, then maybe shrink that bowl a little bit. And I think that you can find an incredible amount of joy and success and pleasure and wonder in bringing your work back to the work, just doing it for the work. Whatever rewards come from that to that, I think you're just going to enjoy them more. So that's one thing I will start with
Yeah.
from that. For me, it wasn't really a choice about working with the land. I just need to be attached to the land. So I was not going to be satisfied. I was not going to be happy in a city. I had gone to Boston to go to graduate school, And at that point, I had a family, young family, and there was that thought about going that career path and going to the city and doing something there. But I need to be connected. I need to be able to walk in the woods. I need to be able to work in the earth. I come from a farming family. My grandparents were farmers, dairy farmers, and then other growing food, growing crops. So I think it's in me to have to do that. And yeah. So, but going back to that point, just there are ways to lead a life, a creative life that you derive joy from. That doesn't have to be, just don't set yourself up by saying, if I don't sell a million copies, I'm not going to be happy. Um, I know I've been down that road. I wanted to be famous. I still would. I mean, if I had it, I'd probably be psyched.
Right.
I don't know, maybe, but that was a drive for me for a long time, especially around the music. Being a musician for me had a whole big ball of, not so much good stuff, because it was
Yeah.
always such a pressure in my music career early on to be like, well, I've got to be, superstar.
Right.
And if that's not happening, I was just never satisfied. Playing a bar, playing the nightclubs, playing the coffee house circuit when I was doing that in the early 90s. Wasn't a lot of joy in that because I was always wanting something more,
Right.
So anyway.
And I would venture to say, as successful as you could have and might have been, I still wonder if, even if that had come, if that would have been scratching the spiritual itch that your poetry and your photography have. And I'd love you to talk a little bit, Justen, about the multifaceted approach, because it's far from unique. You and I actually both dabble, although I am, unlike you, my talents are mostly through the written word. Very no musical or drawing ability whatsoever. But so in that regard, you're among rare. You're in rare air in terms of very successfully and proficiently doing more than one genre. Talk a little bit about how different aspects of your sensibility are fed through the different forms, and how maybe they kind of feed each other.
Mhm. Well, it wasn't conscious. So that through line to say what I had started with is looking, I think some of these things came as a way of giving expression to what I'm feeling. And so early on, music gave expression to what I was feeling, and poetry gave expression to what I was feeling. Photography then, became an expression. And so for me, I feel like these things find me. And even the music, when I wrote my album, The War for the Valley, which is an accompaniment to A Machine for Remembering for the poetry book, which is also accompanied by the images of refugees, all of that was one project, which I did as a performance piece, a theater piece, performed 2 seasons here on the Vineyard. That's how I had to express it. That wasn't really a choice. I didn't, and in fact, I learned to play the piano because there was music humming that I could hear it, but I needed to be able to, I had to be able to translate it into the form of a song. And so what I was hearing, what I was experiencing, was literally taught me how to play the piano. I got a piano and I sat down and, one ding, ding, ding note at a time, figured out how to do it. So it's really out of necessity. I feel I don't know. I can't even take, you know, credit for what they are. It's just some of them, like the photography, just comes. It wasn't anything I just feel blessed to have it because it's not um anything like the poetry writing. I work really hard at. Writing does not come easily to me.
Mhm.
So that is something that takes a long time for me. Poems, books take years, decades sometimes to happen. Photos, I see inside before I make them, and then I make them. Music is just the pure expression of my soul. That is like a direct singing out.
Mhm.
And so they all have very different, they're all very different, you
Yeah.
know. They serve me differently, and I think they ask me to serve them differently. And that is sometimes, it's not easy. Having all these different things too, Sean, I'd say you said successful. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't always feel successful at any of them. I feel sometimes so pulled between the different ones that I don't know if I give enough of my attention to any one thing to be truly great at any of them.
Mhm.
Um, and I think over time I'm just losing that the demand to be great is 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 going away, and the just the necessity to create and to create what it is that I'm perceiving that I need to bring into form is taking, a precedent over anything. Regardless, I want, obviously I want to make it good because I want it to communicate with
Right.
people, but the idea that something is great or I need to make it great is, is slowly um, dissolving.
Well, so, I think as anyone watching can perceive, your humility and modesty precede you. I think it's a rare talent to be able to access those creative outlets and channel them properly. So I would say, you don't just have skill as a photographer, but you do bring a poet's sensibility to see the
Mhm,
story,
mhm,
and the work you've done with the photographs is more than just arresting images, which is its own form of art, of course, but you go a little bit deeper. While you were talking, it made me think, I'm going to butcher another quote, but Oscar Wilde um, said something along the lines near his death of, I've put all my genius into my life, talking about his
Wow.
body of work. And as anyone, reading about his life, he was described as no one had ever heard someone speak so perfectly, like dialogue. So he did live a, gregarious existence. He probably lamented that he maybe could have been more productive,
Mm,
despite the genius that he left the world with. But you strike me as someone that your genius is manifest in both. And I think you have the wisdom to understand, like, I think as humans we're selling ourselves short if we put all our eggs in one basket. I mean, again, I there's exceptions, right? Like someone like Faulkner, like he needed to buckle down and write his novels. Like I suspect the world didn't need more of Faulkner at dinner parties, but your ability to find and make the time to teach, to run Noepe, our time together, whether it's in a kayak or in the kitchen,
mhm.
that's art. So your life is very artful. So I would say that it really is appropriate to use the word abundance. You use the abundance, utilize that as effectively as you can. So sure, could you devote more time and continue to refine your different areas? I mean, we all can, but I don't want you to be too hard on yourself, because I think you're balancing a lot of different talents that not only serve your own work but are serving the world, certainly.
I thank you, Sean. You're so generous. Thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, I struggle too because it's like if I was, if the work was truly genius, it would be known, people would have it. It would be in a museum, or the images and the poetry would blah, 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 blah. So whatever. But then again, like we've been talking about and like we often talk about, does that really matter? And to go back to that Robert Henry quote, to find the gain in the work, to find the gain in the work. And part of the reason I call devotion to writing what I call devotion to writing, and I really align the principles of being an artist with principles that are found in monastic uh, pursuits,
Yep.
is there are a lot of parallels. And one of those parallels is working in working, again, going back, it's absurd. It is absurd what we do as artists, as someone who has a faith and a belief in something that is can't be seen, can't be proven would have is absurd. And they went and lived, I love Italy. And one of the reasons I love Italy is its history of monasticism and these lives of saints who, whether some of them were mentally ill, probably, but their commitment to, my vision is of, that I am going to serve God. And if that means going and living in a burlap sack in a cave, that's what I'm going to do. Call me crazy. And I think artists, yes, we're not living in burlap sacks, but I'm going to bring this book out. Nobody cares about this poetry, these images, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody, but you do. But you do. And you believe in it so much that you're willing to devote years of your life to bringing this, to share it with another, because you believe that there's some good in it, there's some beauty in it that is going to connect with another human being. It's not a selfish thing. And a lot of artists too get hung up on, it's selfish if I spend time away from my family or my friends or et cetera. It's, people get bogged down in that. And it's too et cetera. But anyway, to be able to spend years on something that nobody else believes in except us, and to stay true to that and committed to that and bring it to the world and give it as a gift, that's a journey that we go on. And we do it alone because there's nobody giving us that paycheck at the end of the week, and there's nobody patting us on the back and saying, this is great, for the most part. And then again, this is what also around these saints, always communities would pop up, right? Monastic communities would happen to support one another. And so again, the parallels with artists, the community being really important for us as artists, as creatives, to find community, not just that supports us, but we can support and contribute to and give back to.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess that maybe brings it full circle.
It totally does. And, I'm very satisfied with this conversation because I think it's given people an adequate taste of what I refer to as the Justen Ahren experience. But for folks that will find you online, because we'll put all the necessary links to discover you and your work.
Thank you.
But let's conclude for today. People that are watching that are like, I'm not quite sold. Why should I check out Devotion to Writing? What would you say to someone that's like, I might want to take one of these workshops?
What would I say? Take a risk, be curious. It's really about what you're going to discover from your own process. I just am kind of, maybe I can help point to some things that have worked for me, but it's such a journey. If you want to take it, no matter where you are, whether you're not sure if you want to write, or you just think about it, but you haven't really put anything to the page, or whether you've written, many books, I think what I offer is just an approach that is a little bit maybe against the grain, maybe not, maybe it's becoming more kind of fashionable, but that is this finding the joy in the experience of and honoring the moment of creation that you engage with when you sit to create, and the creative energy, force, spirit that we are. And the joy, the curiosity, the wonder of all that. So some of us work perfectly well, but we work and we're miserable while we're working, or we work and it's just like such a struggle. And so I think part of what I do is like, can we find wonder in this? Can we find awe? Can we find joy? Can we come to love another place of loving the experience that we're having as creative beings?
I mean, that's as good a mic drop as I could have scripted. Folks, you hopefully have seen abundant evidence of why I adore this guy, why I'm so inspired by him, and why he has inspired so many others. So please check out Justen. Go online. Again, we'll put the links into the comments. The schnauzers who have mostly behaved have just broken into the room to offer their endorsement.
Yay.
Henry agrees.
What a great
Uh,
end.
Henry and Higgins say check out justenahren.com.
Must be dinner time.
It's dinner time. We're gonna
Yeah.
eat Uncle if he doesn't get with the program.
Yeah.
Justen, as always, two things that I always say when we talk: thank you and to be continued. Because if we can count on nothing else in this world, is that you and I are going to come together and talk shop, compare notes, and hopefully continue to build the community and inspire others to do the same. I think that's good life's work. It keeps me on a very positive path. So once again, I have nothing to say to you, but thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Well, Sean, I thank you. And thank you for having me on and giving me this opportunity to talk about what I love and to have this conversation with you, because it is just an extension of the conversations we continue to have wherever we are. And I love you. I love what you do. And I appreciate you. And thank you very much.
Love you too, brother. Folks, thank you for checking out Some Things Considered. You can check out back issues on the site. You can give feedback. You can reach out. Let me know if you want to be on the show. Tell me about a friend of yours you think should be featured. And the key takeaway, of course, is what we're trying to do here is advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Support your artists, buy books, make your voice heard, make sure you vote, be a good person, and find that abundance and find that art. We will see you soon, and I hope everyone stays well. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to Some Things Considered. Find out more, including how to be a guest, at seanmurphy.net. Reminder, we are obsessed with story and celebrating creativity. Also, we're here to advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Drop us a line, get involved, and support our creatives who are the lifeblood of our culture. I'm Sean Murphy. See you on the next episode of Some Things Considered.